My name's Stephanie Wine, and I'm the Clean Water Advocate with Penn Environment. And we're here to celebrate the introduction of Representative Boback's House Bill 2025 to address the crisis of lead in school drinking water. So I'm going to hand it off to Representative Boback to say a few words.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning. It's certainly my pleasure to be here today with Representative Pat Harkins and Penn Environment Stephanie Wine as we promote House Bill 2025, which would protect drinking water for Pennsylvania students. News out of Flint, Michigan over the past few years has heightened public consciousness about the devastating impacts of lead in public water supplies. We know that lead-polluted water, especially when consumed by children, can have long-standing health consequences. A USA Today article recently reported that Pennsylvania ranked highest in the number of times water supplied to schools and daycare centers tested for high levels of lead. And this was between 2012 and 2015. We were at the top of a list that we certainly don't want to be the top of. The bill Representative Harkins and I have introduced will put Pennsylvania at the forefront of lead testing for public drinking water supplies that serve our children. I would certainly be pleased to see that our Commonwealth would be the leader, the number one in all the states in this area. As a legislator, an educator, and first and foremost, as a parent, I feel a sense of urgency in ensuring that our children are not exposed to dangerous lead. We must create a safeguard to prevent another Flint, Michigan tragedy. I would like to thank Representative Pat Harkins, Stephanie Wine from Penn Environment, our research staff who helped draft this legislation, and the over 50 colleagues who co-sponsored this bill. It is my hope that we are able to act swiftly to pass this incredibly important initiative. The health of Pennsylvania's children depends on it. Thank you for your attention today. Stephanie?
Thank you, Representative. Again, my name is Stephanie Wine, and I'm the Clean Water Advocate at Penn Environment. We're a statewide, citizens-based environmental advocacy group, and we're so happy to celebrate the introduction of House Bill 2025. I really want to thank the representative for introducing this legislation, and again for the over 50 co-sponsors that have joined in support of the bill. The Flint, Michigan drinking water crisis really was a wake-up call for America. A problem that we thought was solved decades ago is commonplace today. And as the representative said, Pennsylvania has topped the list for the number of times our schools have had elevated lead levels found in their taps. Which is, when you think about it, the very place that our children are going to learn and grow. They are often drinking water that can harm their learning and their development. And this is happening in every corner of the Commonwealth, from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, from Williamsport to Adams County, in urban schools, in suburban schools, in rural schools. And incredibly, and this shocks every parent I talk to, there are no federal requirements for testing or reporting of lead in drinking water in most of our schools. And there are no legal thresholds for this dangerous contaminant in our schools when we know it's not safe at any level. Without standardization, when schools do voluntarily test, best practices aren't always used, and as a result, and the results are rarely shared with teachers or community members or with parents. And when you combine that with the fact that even under the best circumstances, testing can underestimate the presence of lead, the problem is actually probably more widespread than we even know. We should send our children to schools where their health isn't at risk. We need to test, we need to tell, and we need to treat. Representative Boback's legislation will make Pennsylvania a national leader for protecting our kids. One, it would establish regular testing of water outlets in schools used for drinking and cooking. Two, it would make mandatory disclosure to parents and members of a school community who have a right to know if their children are safe. And third, it would establish a statewide standard for the acceptable level of lead at 5 parts per billion. That's the standard for bottled water, and our kids deserve that much. We urge other leaders in Harrisburg to support this important legislation. And I'd now like to introduce Representative Pat Harkins to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out on such an important issue. I would first like to thank Representative Boback for taking the lead with this important legislation and for including me in this press conference. Thank you to Dave Mazur and Penn Environment and Stephanie for their investment and investigation and report last year that spurred this legislation. Thinking back to what happened in Flint, Michigan, we're all reminded that we have a long way to go to properly protect our children, our families, and our constituents from lead in our drinking water. I was just explaining to a couple of folks up here that I do dabble in a little bit of plumbing on the side, and if you see what comes out of some of the older homes, not just in my area up in Erie, but around the state, the old lead pipes and the old cast iron that water travels through, you wouldn't drink water if you saw what came through and what's used to process these pipes. But I think we are making some steps. But I was explaining how when you solder a pipe, you have to use solder that you melt into the line, and you always have to look to make sure that you don't have lead content in the solder, or you're defeating the purpose of installing all the new lines. So those are some of the things we have to look at. But representing Erie, I want to make sure that my constituents are protected. But this isn't just an urban issue. Data in PA shows that there's lead in drinking water, and it can be in rural and suburban areas as well. This legislation allows us to protect one of our most vulnerable populations to lead poisoning, which is our children, at a place that they often spend the most of their time in their waking hours, which is in school. It's imperative that we come together on this issue. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's an issue that's for the common good of everyone involved. And again, I lend my support to do whatever we have to do to get it over the goal line. Thank you.
And now Representative Marguerite Quinn is going to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate the efforts of Representatives Boback and Harkins on this. You know, this time last week we were sitting through appropriation hearings, and I found it very interesting that the entire day where we were speaking with the Education Secretary, that we were talking about school safety. Now, I fully recognize that those school safety issues were not the school safety issues that are in front of us in this bill right now, but the theme is there, it's common. You know, we test our homes and have for years to make sure at any point of a real estate transaction, there's lead tests if the home is a certain age. You know, that's been an ongoing thing. Yet when it comes to something so basic about the safety of our children in their schools where we send them to be safe and to be in a nurturing learning environment, you know, this is something we can do. We can be proactive, and we could actually address a school safety issue that's right there in front of us, and the solution doesn't take complicated legislation, doesn't involve mental health, doesn't involve any of the other things that are being discussed today as we speak in this Capitol. It's common sense legislation. It's for our kids. And I will add, I live in an area, and I've grown up on a well, and I'm on a well. As we talk about safety in our public water systems, it's imperative that those people on wells, whether you're from the suburbs or a more rural area than mine, recognize that they have a responsibility to themselves and to their families to test their own water. So often the test is simply a bacteria test where, you know, I don't think it's the bacteria that's going to get you. It's going to be the other stuff, the natural occurring incidents of arsenic and other things that are pockets within our aquifers. So thank you for this. I look forward to working with you to keep our schools safe, our children safe, and safer communities.
To wrap it up? All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you again to Representative Boback and the over 50 co-sponsors who have joined on in support of this legislation of House Bill 2025. We urge all our other leaders in the House to sign on to this legislation, and thank you all again. If anybody has any questions for any of the representatives here, myself, I'd love to answer them. All right, thank you so much.